In January 2026, archaeologists clearing ground for a road in Suffolk opened a grave. Inside it were 2 people and a horse. The horse was in full harness. There was a sword, 2 shields, spears, a large iron-bound bucket, and a bronze bowl with a drinking cup or horn set inside it, its rim decorated with silver. Everything you would expect from the burial of somebody who mattered enormously to the people who put them in the ground. What was not inside the grave was bone, not a fragment, not a tooth. The acid in Suffolk's sandy soil had dissolved all 3 bodies completely, the 2 people and the horse, over about 1,400 years. And yet you can see them, because when a body decays in that particular soil, it stains it. The outline survives. Archaeologists call them sand silhouettes, and they capture the position of a shoulder, the curve of a spine, the bend of a horse's neck where it was folded to fit the grave. A photograph of one looks like a shadow left behind by somebody who is not there anymore. The man leading the excavation, Len Middleton of Oxford Cotswold Archaeology, described that barrow as a princely burial. He placed it in the same tradition as Sutton Hoo, which is where this gets complicated, because Sutton Hoo is 20 miles down the same coast. It sits in the same sand, and it has exactly the same problem. The Sizewell C nuclear power station began construction in January 2024 on the Suffolk coast between Aldeburgh and Southwold. British law requires that before major infrastructure disturbs the ground gets examined. So attached to that power station is an archaeological project at a scale almost nobody outside the profession has registered. 70 separate sites, around 200 archaeologists, roughly 2 million square meters of ground. Oxford Cotswold Archaeology, who hold the contract, have called it the largest and most complex dig of a generation. The excavation spans something like 40,000 years of human presence on that coastline, from Neanderthals, through the first farmers, to Second World War coastal defenses still sitting in the dunes. They have pulled an Iron Age oak ladder out of a well, a Roman pottery kiln at Middleton, a Beaker period cremation urn. In 2023, they found more than 300 11th century silver coins wrapped in lead and cloth, which the team nicknamed the pasty, because that is what it looked like coming out of the ground. And then, on a 6.5-kilometer stretch being cleared for the Sizewell Link Road near a village called Theberton, they found the cemetery. At least 11 barrows. Burial mounds arranged deliberately across a prominent ridge so that anyone moving along that coast would have seen them against the sky. Some burials were cremations. Some were inhumations, bodies laid in the ground, furnished with weapons, jewelry, and vessels. 6th and 7th century, early Anglo-Saxon, and in one of them, the horse and the 2 people, and the harness. Now, why does the bone disappear? Suffolk's coastal soil is sand, and it is acidic. Bone is largely made of a mineral called hydroxyapatite, and hydroxyapatite dissolves in acid. Given enough centuries in the wrong chemistry, a skeleton simply goes into solution and drains away. What is left behind is a difference in the sand. The body alters the material immediately around it as it decomposes. The color, the texture, the density. So you get a body-shaped region of soil that is subtly, measurably not like the soil next to it. Excavating that is not really digging. It is closer to sculpting. You remove the surrounding sand a few millimeters at a time and try not to destroy the very thing you're looking for, because the object is a stain, and a stain has no strength. Middleton's phrase was that the silhouettes capture the outlines of the bodies in remarkable detail. He is not exaggerating. In the Theberton horse grave, you can read the animal's posture, legs and neck arranged, positioned to fit the space it was given. So here is what that site has given us. It has given us the shape of these people, their scale, their arrangement, how they were laid out, what was placed with them, who was buried beside whom. And it has taken away almost everything else. This is the part I want to be straight with you about, because it is the part most coverage skips. Modern archaeology's most powerful tools all require bone. Ancient DNA needs bone or teeth. Isotope analysis, which can tell you where a person spent their childhood by reading the chemistry of the water they drank, needs bone or teeth. Estimating age at death, biological sex, diet, disease, injury, bone. At Theberton, there is none. So we cannot say how old these people were. We cannot say whether they were men or women. We cannot say whether they were related to each other, though they share a grave. We cannot say whether they grew up in Suffolk or arrived from somewhere across the North Sea. And that last one matters more than it sounds, because it is the central unresolved argument of the entire period. The question is roughly this: when Roman Britain ended and Anglo-Saxon England began, what actually happened to the people? Was there a large migration from what is now Denmark, northern Germany, and the Netherlands, physically replacing much of the population? Or did a relatively small number of incomers arrive, and the existing British population gradually adopt their language, their dress, their burial customs, and eventually their identity? Migration, or acculturation. Historians have argued about it for a century and a half. Ancient DNA is the tool that has started to settle it. In 2022, a study published in Nature sequenced genomes from 460 medieval Northwest Europeans, 278 of them from England. It found a substantial influx of continental Northern European ancestry, closely related to the populations of what is now Germany and Denmark. In eastern England specifically, roughly 3/4 of the early medieval ancestry traced back to continental regions bordering the North Sea. 3/4, not a small elite arriving and being copied, a genuine, large-scale movement of people. But it varied enormously between sites, and local British ancestry persisted alongside it, sometimes within the same cemetery, sometimes within the same family. So the picture is not replacement. It is mixing, at a scale and a pace that differed from one community to the next. Now look at where Theberton is, eastern England, the Suffolk coast, directly on the front edge of the North Sea, the exact region that study was describing. It is one of the most important places in Britain to ask that question. And its soil has destroyed the only evidence that could answer it. In 1939, at Sutton Hoo, near Woodbridge, a landowner named Edith Pretty asked a self-taught archaeologist called Basil Brown to open the mounds on her property. What he found under the largest one was an entire ship, 27 meters of it, dragged up from the river and buried whole. Except the ship was not there either. Every plank of it had rotted away. What survived was the pattern of the iron rivets, holding their positions in the sand, and a hull-shaped stain in the ground where the timber used to be. The most famous archaeological discovery in British history is, physically, an impression. The chamber inside it held the helmet, the shoulder clasps, the gold buckle, the purse lid, objects so recognizable they have become shorthand for the entire period. Also in that chamber, among the vessels, was a large cast brass bowl of Eastern Mediterranean manufacture, a Coptic bowl. Around the inside runs an engraved procession of 4 walking animals. No body was found in Mound 1. Whether one was ever there, dissolved by the same acid, is still argued over. And here is the detail that connects the two sites most directly. In 1991, Martin Carver's team excavated Mound 17 and found a young man buried in a tree trunk coffin around the year 610. Beside him, in a separate cut under the same mound, they found his horse, sacrificed, its legs and neck bent to fit the grave. With it was a bridle mounted with gilt bronze plaques worked in interlace ornament. A man, a horse, harness, weapons, sand. Now compare that with what came out of the ground at Theberton in 2026. 6th to 7th century. A princely barrow, a horse in full harness, two individuals with weapons, a sword, shields, and imported metalwork. And among the finds from the wider Sizewell excavations, a Coptic bowl of the same broad type. Middleton put Theberton in the same tradition as Sutton Hoo, Snape and Prittlewell. Snape is another Suffolk ship burial, a short way up the same coast. Prittlewell, in Essex, is the burial of a man so richly furnished he is generally called the Prittlewell Prince. And Prittlewell was found in the autumn of 2003 by archaeologists surveying ahead of a road-widening scheme at Priory Crescent in Southend-on-Sea. That grave turned out to be the earliest dated Anglo-Saxon princely burial in England, and the earliest Anglo-Saxon Christian burial found anywhere, laid down before the Augustinian mission arrived in 597. Inside were a gold belt buckle, the remains of a lyre, glassware, and a water vessel from the eastern Mediterranean, possibly Syrian. The richest Anglo-Saxon burial found since 1939. And it was found because somebody wanted to widen a road. Now, hold those three together. Sutton Hoo, a landowner's curiosity in 1939. Prittlewell, a road scheme in 2003. Theberton, a link road for a nuclear power station in 2026. We are not finding these because we know where to look. We are finding them because we keep digging holes for other reasons. So what does Theberton add, if it cannot tell us who these people were? It tells us about practice. And practice turns out to be informative. 11 barrows on a prominent ridge is a statement. These graves were meant to be seen, from the land, and very probably from the sea. That is a community marking territory, and marking it with its dead. The horse tells us something specific. Horses are enormously expensive. Killing one and putting it in the ground is destroying wealth on purpose, in public, and the destruction is the point. It is a demonstration that this family can afford to lose something that valuable. The same logic runs straight through Sutton Hoo's ship. The mixture of cremation and inhumation in one cemetery tells us these were not people following a single fixed rule. Two quite different ways of treating a body, side by side, in the same generations. And the imported vessels, Eastern Mediterranean metalwork on the Suffolk coast, tell us these communities sat on trade routes running a very long way east. Put that together, and you get a picture of the East Anglian coast in the 6th and 7th centuries as somewhere connected, wealthy, hierarchical, and confident. Not the isolated backwater the phrase Dark Ages was invented to describe. Here is the thing I keep coming back to. Our picture of early medieval England is not a picture of early medieval England. It is a picture of the parts of it that happen to be buried in forgiving chemistry. Bury someone in chalk, and their skeleton waits 1,000 years for you. Bury them in Suffolk sand, and in 14 centuries there is nothing left to test. Only a shadow in the ground, and whatever metal and glass they were given. The Suffolk coast is one of the most archaeologically significant stretches of land in Britain. Sutton Hoo, Snape, and now Theberton. And its soil is systematically deleting exactly the evidence that would answer the biggest open question about the people who lived there. We are not looking at the past. We are looking at the residue that survived, and quietly assuming it is representative. Those two people at Theberton were laid down with a horse, a sword, shields, and a silver-rimmed cup, by a community that wanted them remembered. 1,400 years later, they are a stain in the sand on the route of a link road, and we do not know their age, their sex, their family, or which side of the North Sea they were born on. They were remembered. We simply cannot read what was written.